we want to fill gaps with conscious modes of exertion, right? Cognitively, we function off of a negative cognitive bias. Like right now, some of us are sitting in this room and all we hear is the music outside and we're annoyed by it and irritated, right? But let them have fun. Why does it bother you? You're filtering in millions of pieces of stimuli at a per second experience, but you can only process and synthesize a percentage of those. And the negative bias is what has us deeply impacted by someone saying something hurtful, and it exponentially hurts in comparison to somebody saying something nice to us, right? I need you to say 5 nice things to me to outweigh the impact of something negative. The negative bias is there, where me making money doesn't feel as good as the difficulty I experience as losing money, right? The negative bias causes the loss to be that much more impactful than the gain, right? The consciousness, the taqwa of Ramadan didn't stop at the end of Ramadan, but to attach now meaning that shifts the paradigm to say, well, what was the point of all of this? So that the continuity is one that recognizes, well, what's Shawwal supposed to be about? What is all of this supposed to be about? What is it that I'm chasing after at the end of the day? And is it just feelings, or is there something more than that? Do you get what I'm saying? Right? So Allah is Al-Hakim. He's the most wise of those who have wisdom. And there's not anything that is without meaning in Allah's plan. So he doesn't bring you up so that you fall flat on your face a week after Ramadan is done, but there's a point to it all. And that's going to be important to understand. What's the point to it, right? My 9-year-old was fasting this Ramadan. She's got a friend in school who is also fasting, like 6 of them in their like local public school that they go to. It helped to encourage them. She has one kid in her son in her school who just like says a lot of different things about Islam and Ramadan. She told my daughter that like if she misses a fast, she's gonna have to fast for 60 days. And Medina came home, was like, I gotta fast, Baba, because I'm not trying to fast 60 days. And I was like, who told you this? And she said the kid's name. I was like, that's not how it works, baby. And so you're 9 years old. Like you don't even have to be fasting right now. But she's taking like bits of information, but she's 9. Her capacity is going to synthesize it in that way. The realities of what we experience are going to get understood based off of the perspective that we engage them in, right? And just like you engaged in choice in Ramadan about, do you watch something when you eat or not? That's your choice. And your level of spirituality is indicated by the choices that you make. Do I go to pray in Jama'ah or not? It's your choice. Allah gave you that capacity. Choice is now also not just about walking to places or dressing a certain way or doing, but perspective is a choice. It's a hard choice to make, but it's a choice. And when you don't have a choice that's made, you've essentially chosen. And a lot of what's being said right now is also indicating that you haven't chosen a perspective on what's the point of all of it. What was it supposed to be about? And then you're going to definitely like float around in the midst of the aftermath of something, trying to hold on to it, because it's not about holding on to an iftar dinner or holding on to like an amazing halaqah or holding on to like a beautiful prayer for a moment, because then it's treated as something fleeting. You have the experience, but it's attached to something that's bigger. What is the bigger thing that it's attached to? What is the point of it all? Do you know what I mean? Do you get what I'm saying? What am I saying?
You're saying that I guess you're saying it doesn't have to end here because Ramadan is not meant to be a fleeting experience. Like, this is the only month where you can pray and all that stuff. Like that's you're meant to take it from there.
Why did Allah give you Ramadan? Why do you think? Did you think He gave it to you so that at the end of it you would feel miserable?
No, I think it's essentially to take that keep going with it, even when Ramadan isn't there. I mean, it's actually much easier to pray and to be ground and everything during Ramadan because you don't have so many distractions with food and stuff, and you have like suhoor and iftar and community and tarawih. So it's almost like there's set things that you're almost supposed to do. So it's almost kind of easy. So it's like it's almost like I don't want to say practice round. It's like, it is. It's almost like a bit of a practice round.
But why don't you want to say that? It's not disrespectful. Yeah, go ahead. Some and Noor, either one of you. Makes a lot of sense. You're gonna say something, son?
You're not like more than just like
When we started, I asked you all, what is that thing that you miss or that most transformational experience? And just a little while before we had this conversation, I had a smaller halaqah with a group of our students and asked them a very similar question. And every one of them, they spoke about a very vivid experience that they had when they broke their fast on this day, when they spent that moment walking with our friends back to the apartment. A specific moment that can be explained in such detail, whereby you might even remember what your friend was wearing or what fragrance that you had put on your body or the taste of the food, and we experience things like that, those very transformative experiences during our life. And we often utilize them to pick ourselves up when we're not feeling so spiritually high, whatever we want to call that. And a couple of years ago, and I think we do this sort of generally. A couple of years ago, Imam Khalid and I, we took many people for Hajj. I can't remember how many people, a lot of people for Hajj. And it was the day of Arafah. And I remember on this day of Arafah, it was so incredibly hot. And it was a pretty miserable morning because of some logistical hurdles that, the group had encountered. And during the course of the day, I taken out a number of people to make dua and supplicate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this very sacred day. And during the course of us making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, asking God for forgiveness and asking God to respond to our supplication, it started to rain, and it was a really, really unique and beautiful experience. And I'm always reminded of that because of the way that I felt. And I remember how the rain smelled different that day. And it didn't matter anything that I experienced before in my entire life. That was the most important moment of my life up until that very, transformative moment. And every time that I meet, my friends that I went with on Hajj or people that I, who were part of the group, they always remind me, remember that day of Arafah when it rained? You remember that?
Yeah, of course.
And it was a really, really unique and beautiful moment. And everyone came out of their tents in order to experience. And so many times, even just during the course of this Ramadan, people were sending me messages of Eid Mubarak or Ramadan Mubarak or whatever it might be. And they said, inshallah, we get to go for Hajj this year and we get to experience something similar to that. And I remember talking to this friend of mine and he said that, whenever I feel like down and low, I remember that moment when the rain fell, on the day of Arafah. So I said, why? Similar to what we're asking about right now. And he's like, I don't know, it just felt different. So what did it feel different? What is it that was so transformative? Knowing very well that it was a unique experience for me, but I wanted to hear it from him. And it was so difficult for him to verbalize why it was so important to him. Because again, what we often do as people, we love to, I wouldn't say worship a moment, but we love to find sacredness in a really, really small experience. And that's not a bad thing all the time. But to always go back to those moments as a pick-me-up when we're feeling low is not good if we're not getting to the essence of why that moment was so important to me. It was a moment of utter and absolute servitude to God. And I felt the presence of my Creator at that moment. And I remember finding sweetness in worshiping my Lord. And I can utilize that experience knowing very well that I felt in a state of sincerity and in devotion and in servitude and in worship to my Creator at that moment. And it wasn't the rain that smelled differently, or it wasn't that, food that I ate on that particular day that was so incredibly, transformative as an experience. It was my spiritual closeness or my proximity to God that allows for me to utilize that moment to continue to carry forward during the course of experiences in life when I go through lows. And that's fine because we go through ups and downs during the course of our lives. But it's all about like maintaining or reaching a certain height where we can be consistent. So when we reach a height or a high, so to say, and then we fall a little bit or we slip a little bit, that's not the end of the world, right? We, like you said, it's like a training ground, right? If you want to call it that, whereby we have been given certain tools that you accomplished yourself. Nobody shoved it down, into your spiritual hearts or into your soul, made you fast for 30 days or 29, depending on when you started the month of Ramadan, or made you pray in the darkness of the night, or made you supplicate or recite Quran. You did that. And there was no shackles, no distractions. You did it willingly. You did it comfortably. You did it sincerely. Maybe it was difficult. Maybe it was challenging at certain points, at certain junctures during the course of your life. But it's about understanding that we've built up the capacity to continue to grow. So it's not about falling into this trap. I think that it's a really, really dangerous sort of encounter that we experience during the course of our lives, whereby we beat ourselves up really, 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 really hard for 3 or 4 days after because I'm not doing this post-Ramadan, or I'm not doing this in the month of Shawwal, or I haven't done this yet. Take it easy on yourself for a moment. It's not bad to be self-critical. It's not bad to want to get better. It's not bad to, not be comfortable with complacency. That's good. You want to be better. You want to, build yourself up so that you're able to have those unique experiences again. But it's not about the experience, it's about a being. It's about a presence of heart, a presence of soul that also does not lead to empty ritual, right? So everyone was mentioning in the beginning that you felt more connected with your prayers or your recitation of Quran or whatever it might be, and now you don't necessarily feel that. But you experienced it before, that means you can experience it again. And the whole universe and the cosmos hasn't changed that much. It's only been 4 or 5 days. Yes, the month of Ramadan is unique. أيامه أفضل الأيام ولياليه أفضل الليالي وساعاته أفضل الساعات. Right? Its days are the best of days and its nights are the best of nights. Its moments are the best of moments. That's the words of the Messenger of God sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But your God is still the best of gods, and He's still the most merciful, and He's still the most generous, and He's still the most graceful. And He's still given us another day and another opportunity, another chance, another night, another Friday, inshallah. Every opportunity is still a new opportunity. That chance to reconnect and connect again is still present. You can still fast, you can still pray. You might not feel the same, but we're not about a feeling. It might feel good to experience that feeling, You can go back to it and experience a little bit, but remember to connect it to something bigger, and that bigger picture is still present. Follow one second.
There's elements of things that now resurface post-Ramadan, and the stage that we exist in is a stage experientially that most of us exist in, where conceptually what a lot of you were doing was now being in control of the Nufs throughout the constraints of Ramadan, right? And the Quran, it identifies different stages of the Nufs. Many of you have likely heard these stages, but now you want to think about experiencing them, and think about, where do I categorize myself? So the Nafs al-Amara bisu that the Quran talks about. When you are Amir, you're a leader, you're a commander of something. When you are Ammar, right, you're like the supreme commander. You're the sovereign commander. It's that much more emphatic. And so the Nafs that is the supreme commander towards that which is evil, Asu, is not just encompassing like one facet of something that's problematic, but it's encompassing all of the things that are problematic, right? Fahsha wal munkar, all kinds of dhunub, right? May Allah protect us from these things. That's like on this end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, you have the nafs al-mutmainna, the nafs that's in a state of just contentment. May Allah grant us all a state that's like this. Where a lot of us oscillate is just in that oscillating nafs, the nafs al-lawama, right? It's one that moves from place to place, and it's good. It's not a bad thing, because reproachment isn't that I just hate on myself. That's a tool of Shaytan. The tool of Shaytan is to give you self-deprecation, to let you believe that there's only inadequacy and deficiency. But the nafs al-lawama is self-reproaching because it recognizes what it did well, that it could do better, and what it doesn't do so well, that it can improve upon. But in order for you to know what you did well, that you can do better, you got to first acknowledge that you did something good, that everything just wasn't terrible or worthless or problematic. And so all of what the Quran says is real. And so Shaitan is not going to get you to just commit a misdeed and slip, but it gets you to believe that there is no point to anything, to just sit around and see things in a prism of what's lacking, right? Like you can say, and I love Tamim and he knows I love him, so I'm not hating on Tamim. But for example, I walk into a room and there's a third of the people and it brings me down, versus, wow, subhanAllah, how many people must have taken time off for work to worship Allah in Ramadan? How many people must have gone out of their way to give up sleep? How many people are getting well-deserved rest right now, right? Shifting the paradigm. Do you get what I'm saying? If you see what is not there, it's not an invalid perspective, but it's giving you indication as to what's going on in here. And what our Prophet ﷺ did was he saw what was there, not what was not there. What Shaitan promises is that he is going to dissuade us, tempt us. The Quranic verses that give indication to this is like pushing us around, pulling us in all directions, but fundamentally to get us to be those who are ungrateful, right? It's a perspective. It influences how you see things. And ingratitude is partially rooted in seeing what's not there, seeing what's lacking, as opposed to seeing what's present. Do you know what I mean? And the challenge here is that you stop then believing in people. You stop believing in yourself, versus you see it as a bigger part. And that nafs al-lawama is going to feel guilty when it's not doing something that's supposed to do. It's telling you that it's on the trajectory that you want to be on. Because the nafs al-amara bisu is going to be happy when it's sitting down and it's just engaging in things that are futile. And it's not going to care if it's sleeping through Fajr, or if it's eating haram, or watching haram, or listening to haram, right? May Allah protect us from these things. So you're not in a bad place. You're in a good place. It might not feel like that, but Shaitan is doing exactly what he intended to do. And now you're going to have to stand up to it in a frame that says, everything that I took from Ramadan, how do I reorient? So the waswasa, in addition to the nafs, doesn't bring me down. And I still believe in a God that believes in me more than I believe in myself. So that I'm not just worshiping Ramadan, but I'm worshiping the creator of Ramadan. I'm worshiping everything that comes before and after Ramadan. Do you get what I mean? How you make choices will influence how other people choose as well. And so you want to choose wisely, choose patiently, choose with the presence of your heart and through your heart, not at its expense. And those moments that Sheikh Faiyaz talk about, especially as you get older, they're going to be amazing to carry you through. Because think, man, what did you do 3 weekends before Ramadan started? Can you remember what you did on that Saturday night? Probably not. But the beauty that Allah instills within you, capacity to have memory, that you can feel what it was like to have your heart tremble in a certain moment. That you can remember what it was like to experience, like certain days and certain nights. Right? Those days of Arafah that we stood on, we're not going to ever forget those. The first time I went for Hajj was in 2005. It was after I had just started working here, and I said that I'm going to go and make this pilgrimage because I have the means to. I went on a very no frills Hajj, right? We were making our own food, rice and potatoes every day. I smelled terrible throughout it, and it was amazing. And I can still remember where I stood when I was 23 years old on the plain of Arafah for the first time on the day of Arafah. And when we go for Umrah and we stand on Jabal al-Rahmah at the plain of Arafah, I can look and still see that spot. I'm not longing for it in the sense that I want to go back to my 23-year-old self, but in the sense that I'm grateful that it informs where I stand today. You see? And when you can then have people who are good people that you can then share in conversations with and memories with, that's what community is about. You serve as a reminder of Allah's mercy. You serve as a reminder of hope. You serve as a reminder of love. If you go in, and I sat down and I was like, hey man, doesn't it just suck right now, the world, right? And isn't life just terrible? Why would it then bring our mood up or make us want to do anything? And then it has residual impact, because if we sit down and we talk to each other about how much life is garbage, then it's going to trickle into your hearts. And then it's going to go from you to the people that you talk to. And this is where Shaytan is strategic. And so you got to be strategic too. And you recognize not in something that's fleeting, but your capacity. You take times to breathe, right? That's why the verse says that indeed in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest. It's the same word, right? The Nufs al-Mutma'inna, that rest is what the remembrance is. So you just take a breath, right? You can say literally in every breath, Allah. It comes from the inner part of your throat. The alif takes the lam to the back of your mouth, and the ha is aspirated as the breath is coming out. And you just rest and you breathe. And you say, well, what's the point of all of this? The gifts that were given to me, the ability to have consciousness and awareness. So I'm not just running diluted in a world that chases after dunya, and it can do it differently. And it might be different. It doesn't look the way everybody else does, but who cares? You felt contentment. You didn't feel happiness. You felt balance. You felt centeredness, right? You can feel sad and centered. You can feel down and centered. You can feel happy and centered. You can feel a lot of things and still have balance. You don't want to be in a place where it becomes misconstrued that it only can look like this and everything else is terrible. So when the time comes, you go pray your prayers. As hard as it is, it's going to be something that creates balance. You go and you get up. The professor, the employer, whoever is in your face, doesn't matter. You're allowed to do the things that you are allowed to do. Just fight what's going on in here. Ramadan is not the battleground. Ramadan is the preparation. The battleground comes beyond Ramadan. This is why we have hadith that say as-sawmu junnah, that fasting is a shield. Taqwa is rooted in waqaya. It's a shield. What are you protecting yourself from? The battle that's within, but now the external vices that are going to come, that's what the book says. That's what the tradition says. It's going to come. It's going to be different. Just got to be ready for it. And the beauty is, it's only been a few days, right? You're catching up on sleep. That's part of it. When you don't sleep a lot, the world gets very sad. That's just how we function, right? I feel amazing. You know why? Because all I've done for the last 3 days is sleep, right? I had a surgery done on my stomach. Many of you know that. I can't do anything other than sleep. So every hour I wake up and then I sleep for another 2 hours. I feel amazing right now because all I've done is sleep, right? My friend has not slept at all.
Maybe I should get surgery.
Yeah, you gotta just go cut your stomach open, man. But I sat down and I can tell that he's not feeling 100%, mashallah, right? That's okay. I don't want him to feel bad, but it's not just a product of one variable. There's complexity to us. Do you know what I mean? So you exerted yourself for 30 days. Why wouldn't you be tired right now? And so you replenish your physical self so that you are in a state now where your emotional self, your spiritual self, your mental self, it's also able to run on high levels of replenishment. If you're running on fumes and then you try to go back to a place that has just emptiness to it, it's going to create emptiness. Do you get what I mean? How many of you have slept well? Not slept a lot, but slept well. How many of you have eaten sensibly? Right? Are paying attention to what your body's telling you about itself. Do you know what I mean? Right? You go into a place where the entire routine is screwed up. It's going to then impact other parts of yourself. And then that voice, that waswasa, may Allah protect us from it, it's going to interject itself at key moments because Shaitan's going to get you where you're most vulnerable. He knows that you don't want to go back to a place that you have identified as being a problematic starting point. You would not be who you are today if you weren't who you were yesterday. And if Shaitan gets you to hate on the one that you were prior to Ramadan, then he's got you in his hand. But if you can get to a place where you recognize that who you were on every yesterday that you lived brings a sense of meaning into who you are today, and there's value to that, then you don't have to hate on any part of yourself. Do you get what I'm saying? Yeah? What am I saying? You're nodding your head.
I mean, you're talking a lot about, positivity and sort of carrying that forward and not being self-deprecating so that you can continue to basically negativity is a tool to that. If you're self-deprecating, then you're kind of spread that energy and you're not able to do the things you need to do and carry the things that you need to carry forward.
Yeah, let's maybe do this really quickly because you want to start to name things, right? What is Shaitan trying to get you to do? What's the point of Shaitan's waswasa? What's his strategy? Yeah. Why don't we do this? If you talk to each other just for a few minutes about it, because these are important things to recognize, right? It's different. It's one of the things that's different. So what's the kind of point of what Shaitan's trying to get you to? What's the end goal? And we can be aware of it. So if you talk for 2 minutes, then we'll come back. What time is it? 8:14. You're gonna leave right after this?
No.
You have a program, another one after this?
Let's leave the gym. Video. A lot of
They'll stay for the program?
Yeah.
What time do you have to start that?
Sure, after tomorrow.
Okay.
I only think 25 minutes.
And so there's
What are we talking about? What do you think? What is like Shaytan strategy here? Post-Ramadan, what's he trying to bring you to? So you have awareness of it, right? We want to have consciousness. Everything isn't just about like organic experience. The Quran, you embrace it as a text of truth. And so it's going to give you indication as to how like things function, right? So what's Shaitan's tactic here? How have you experienced it already? What's it going to bring going forward? Yeah. But you gotta say it out loud so you can confront it and own it. And you say it in a safe space with your sisters and brothers so that you're able to then engage it in a meaningful way and say, like, this doesn't make any sense, right? Because what are we saying? Allah is al-mun'im. He is the giver of blessings. You think God made a mistake in giving you the blessing that he gave to you? Do you know what I mean? Right? The ni'mah comes from the divine. And so in being able to verbalize it so it's not stuck in your head, and then you can confront the thought, and then it lessens in its impact on you. Do you know what I mean? So the gift of Ramadan came from the creator of Ramadan. That's Allah. Why would God give it to you if it wasn't for you to have? Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense? How does it feel to say it out loud? Talk for as long as you want.
It reminds me of like
Yeah, man. Shaitan wants you to hate on yourself. The only entity that did not prostrate to Adam, peace be upon him, in a sense of debasement rooted in arrogance, which is the worst form of debasement. May Allah protect us from it. And so Shaitan wants you to hate on yourself because of that self-hate that is rooted in that Adamic narrative of creation. You see? Does that make sense? Right? And then so say things out loud. So you could be like, what does this mean? In my head, it might make sense, but my heart doesn't necessarily reconcile it. And so at a surface level, it can sound like it's sensible, but it then lacks substance to it. And it's in denial of what's reality. Do you know what I mean? And other things have ambiguity to them, right? God is good. There's no ambiguity to that. Do you get what I mean? What else? What else do we talk about? What is Shaitan trying to do? Where'd your hair go? See a crisis after Ramadan? Yeah? Huh?
Shaitan got loose and he got me.
Man, you just lock yourself in your dorm, bro. Yeah. It looks nice, mashallah. What else? What are we talking about?
He wants you to get to know what's easy rather than what you should be doing and what's correct.
Yeah, and that's the nature of the Nufs. So the two now complement each other. The Nufs is lazy. It does not want you to be generous. It does not want you to be forgiving. It does not want you to volunteer or clean up or do anything, right? It's going to tell you somebody else will say salam to someone. Someone else will ask someone how they're doing, right? It's not going to compel you to exert. And then Shaitan is going to manipulate that. Do you see? So you become aware of its nature, and then you say, no, the heart is going to be sovereign, right? The heart is what was cultivated in Ramadan. So I'm going to keep feeding that part of me so that it's what's making my decisions. Anything else? What did you guys talk about?
What we talked about? Yeah, I think we talked about the point of Ramadan being practices established, but also the whispers of Shaitan are going to test how resilient you are instead, and how much of resistance you're able to show, because ultimately the point is to minimize the frequency by which you succumb to those whispers. I think thinking about your question, what is the ultimate purpose, is to reduce the frequency by which you succumb to whispers, because we're all prone to making errors. And I highlighted that. It's the ultimate goal is to reduce that frequency and show more resistance.
Yeah, amazing, right? It's going into your choice. What are you going to be subservient to? What are you going to succumb to? What are you going to let yourself truly submit to at the end of it, right? And you choose to be an abd of Allah. The Quran says, do you see the one that takes their hawa, their desires being their Lord? You see a lot of indication that there's so much else that you can become subservient to. And one of the easiest ways that Shaitan gets us to become submissive is that we don't recognize how subservient we are to language. So how you talk is going to play a key role in how you see things. And if you keep talking in negative frames, then you're going to see like things negatively, right? And you're not going to see what is actual. You're going to see what it is that you perceive. Maybe we get one more person before we wrap up for Maghrib time. Yeah.
So you say Shaitan is basically someone who cultivates self-doubt, right? Makes you sad, doesn't give you the energy to, do what you're supposed to do. Is that what you're trying to say? He puts us into like this questioning period where we can't move forward, like makes you stuck.
Well, you got to look, Surah Falak and Surah Nas, how do they start? Say it loud, man. Why are you guys? Yeah, and what's comes after the first verse of Surah Falak?
Oh,
Okay, and how does Surah Nas start?
قل أعوذ برب الناس.
Yeah.
ملك الناس.
Yeah.
إله الناس. من شر الوسواس الخناس.
Yeah. So Surah Falaq, you're seeking protection from the divine once in relation to the evil of what he created. In Surah Nas, you're invoking him thrice over for protection from the waswasa of Shaitan. And you want to think about this. Like Shaitan's waswasa is real. It's not a joke. Anybody who thinks that they're not in a place where they can be impacted by it, where it's not a reality, then like you screwed yourself. Like what else are you gonna do? But in these last two chapters, there's a reason, right? Allah is who we are invoking for protection. He's our creator. But 3 times over, you're seeking protection from the waswasa of Shaitan, asking of Allah in these distinct ways. It's a reality. Thoughts are crazy to be able to control. They can be so pervasive. And then you live in New York City and you go to New York University. You're in a place that's just filled with fitna and chaos. There's just constant movement and motion. You don't get to sit still. You don't get to relax. You don't get to be in a place where you're just in a state of kind of tranquility. Because when you're in a state of calm, immediately you feel agitated. I should be doing something. Why is it? Watch something while you're eating food. It's okay, right? What's the problem? You know what I mean? But like in a space where you're constantly like moving, the thoughts permeate. You're not doing this enough. You're not doing that enough. You're doing this wrong. You're doing that wrong. And Shaitan's bringing you to a place. And the experience is such that you don't have to have conscious modes of thoughtfulness to it. But you just take a break, right? Noor stepped out, mashallah. What she said was amazing. That's what you want to do. She recognized something about herself. If I'm in that building, I pray differently than if I sit here and I then study and pray. She owned up to something about herself. She learned what it was that she could only learn experientially. And so she saw that who I was when I was there is not what I want to be. So I'm going to be here. And that's what I'm going to do. You work within the parameters that you're able to work with at the end of the day. But you have to purposely make decisions. We're going to start from next week. Halakha is pretty much every single night of the week, right? Make a choice to come to those and be present in them. Jummah prayers are going to happen. If you have to orient your schedules, if you're working and you're remote, to come sit in a coffee place, then come work in a coffee place or come work here and then come to Jummah because there's barakah in it. What did you experience at the tail end of Ramadan? Barakah. What did you experience as the outcome of barakah? Increase, growth. So use your head in the strategy. Use your heart in the strategy. Don't just be a body that's floating around aimlessly, but tap into your celestial parts that render now intellectual capacity and cognitive ability so that you're thinking about your faith. You're thinking about your spiritual growth. You're building strategy to it. Do you get what I mean? This is why our teachers tell us that reflection on one verse of the Quran with real contemplation is definitively better than reciting it in its entirety without any real reflection on it, right? Because Shaitan wants you to just go through the externals and not deepen in the inward aspect. Do you get what I mean? Does that make sense? And so you are blessed to have a space that is a sanctuary in a city that is constantly moving. What's going to keep you from coming here is going to be you. You have to own up to that. And how you're going to decide how others feel comfortable when they come in is also going to be a product of you. So sit down sometimes and bring up the fact that you know people are sad that Ramadan is done. So bring good tidings to them, uplift them, right? Our prophet is Al-Bashir. He's the one that's the bearer of glad tidings. Do you know what I mean? Increase in positivity. Don't bring only conversations that bring people down. Do you get what I'm saying? Right? And you're going to get it done, mashallah. Like you're going to see that you have capacity to have growth that's gradual. and experience things that are remarkable. So just as we close,